Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Greg Bennick, my friend, I'm so happy to have you on Speakers Who Get Results. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is great. I really appreciate your time, and this is going to be fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's lots of things that we could talk about. Before I get into the many questions I have for you, though, tell me, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
So without any doubt, no hesitation whatsoever, there was a man named Ernest Becker. And a lot of people don't know the name Ernest Becker. Ernest Becker was a cultural anthropologist, a sociologist of sorts, definitely a deep thinker. He explored philosophy. What he did ultimately was explore why human beings behave the way they do. He won the Pulitzer Prize in the early 70s for a book called The Denial of Death. And in that book, he explored our relationship with our own mortality from the perspective of, given that there's this finite limit in our lives, now what do we do? So it was a really fascinating book, but more importantly, he went way deeper than just that book. And I've been writing a biography about him for the last 7 years or so, and I am fascinated by his work. And if I had the chance to sit with him and ask him, okay, given the world we live in, a world that is increasingly complex, and given what I do, which is explore how we manage our way through and keep our focus in a world that is increasingly complex, given, Ernest, that you've read every single book and studied every single thinker that has ever basically lived, help. What can you tell us about this reality and this experience? And I would just sit back. That was question one. I would sit back for 2 hours and let him talk. And then maybe question two would be, any other thoughts? Basically be it. But Ernest Becker would be the interview without a doubt.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Okay, I'm going to go research that. I'll put a Wikipedia link in the show notes for our listeners.
And if anyone has questions about Becker ever, I'm always happy to talk about his work. And that includes you as well. So if you find things and if you don't, let me know. And that'll supplement not being able to sit with Becker, who, died 50 years ago on stage.
Great. I love it. I love it. Okay. So, Greg, you use juggling and coin collecting to give business advice. And I love this. You have a performing background. I have a performing background. Actually, more of a performing background that became a directing background. So we come from the arts. How does this fit into business advice?
Okay, this is maybe my favorite podcast question ever. People don't often ask about coin collecting, but I use it as a metaphor, and juggling is a metaphor as well. So I always tell audiences that the tricks that they might see are not indeed tricks. They're metaphors for life lessons. Here's the case in point. Let's say I'm on stage and I'm talking about focus, and I have a PowerPoint presentation, and there's 375 slides, and I'm boring my audience to tears. Would you rather watch that, or would you rather watch me walk out on stage and have a machete and 2 beanbags, be juggling those and talking about the importance of keeping your eyes on the knife? What is the most important mission critical thing that's ahead of you right now? It's the knife, metaphorically. And when you're watching me juggle a knife, all of a sudden, ideas about focus that it can be applied to your business or your life make a lot more sense. So juggling is a metaphor that I use for the way it feels to be us day to day in the world. We're always feeling like we're juggling. We're always feeling like we have too many objects in the air at once, and it's impossible to know where to put our focus given all the pulls on our attention every single second. So juggling is a great metaphor. Coin collecting is really interesting. Now, that's often a statement not said by people that equate coin collecting with being fascinated. But what I collect and what I have collected, researched, studied, and written about for decades in my hobby life are what are called error coins, coins that are mismade, off-center, double-struck. So the question becomes, does the entire US Mint shut down in the process of making 1 billion coins if it makes one incorrectly, if it makes 100 incorrectly? No, of course it doesn't. So likewise, if in the midst of figuring out processes and ways to be more efficient and ways to be more exciting in our work, if we do something wrong along the way, does the entire process shut down? Of course it doesn't. So I use the error coin as a metaphor, just like the juggling, as a metaphor for a greater lesson about focus, or keeping our attention on a process, or staying in a process when maybe it goes slightly astray. We got to pull it back to center. Error coins and juggling are great metaphors and fun metaphors for those things.
I love it. I love it because metaphors, the human brain retains stories and metaphors much more than we retain facts. Even if, so this is what I work with my clients all the time, is talk about, so what's the metaphor? What's the story that's going to relate to them? And I love that juggling is something that everyone can watch and relate with. I'd like to explore with you. I was listening and I was thinking about practice, because coin collecting, okay, that means informing yourself. Juggling, you've got to practice.
It's true.
And I used to joke when I met a juggler. I said, for years I have jokes. I said, oh yes, I took a juggling class once. I was the comic relief because I couldn't ever get one ball from one hand to the other. And that's my quick, easy deflection. I never figured out how to juggle.
Sure.
But it occurs to me now at this stage in my life that if I had chosen to actually practice so that if I threw something, it went where I wanted it to go,
Right.
which was something I never really needed to do, so I never really learned, maybe I could juggle. It was, yeah. So talk about practice, the value of practice.
It's immense. I mean, it's immense. Here's the thing. Let's say you and I sat down in the same physical reality rather than virtual. In fact, we could do it virtually as well. I absolutely teach people in virtual sessions. I love the fact that the world is still a bit virtual. I still get, requests for virtual events from time to time. That's really nice because I think the virtual is fun. The point is, let's say we're in the physical world, and I handed you an object, a beanbag, and I said, let's learn how to juggle. And you threw it across and it landed on the ground and you stopped. Well, that ends the process. That's it. There's no more. But if you work at it, and I don't mean just work at it until it's perfect, but work at throwing and trying to catch. If you so much as catch that object once, that progress is a self-esteem boost. It's a confidence boost. And through practice, we gain self-confidence and self-esteem, and we feel as though we are onto something. We feel as though we're engaged with something. We feel as though we're on a trajectory. Practice keeps us on a trajectory. And when we're in business, whether we're in life, whether we're in our personal lives, when we stay on a trajectory, we're going to find that results come from that. And that it then increases our confidence and increases our sense of self-esteem. And your background in opera is a perfect example. If you asked me today to sing, it would be a disaster. I once took lessons from an opera coach when I was singing more, and I was terrible. But what I found was going back week after week after week kept me on a trajectory. And I made little improvements along the way. And over time, those incremental small improvements with down days and some up days led to increased success, for lack of a better word. So when we're on a trajectory, we're going to find successes along the way, even if we don't find, for example, with your example, the success of juggling 15 balls at once or whatever it might be. You're going to find successes along the way if you stay on a trajectory.
I love that because, I grew up in the theater where, since I was 5, you rehearse and then you improve. So maybe the metaphor is you learn how to consistently throw one ball from one hand to the other consistently, and then you add another ball.
Or there's another way of looking at it, is that you could take one and just throw one, and that's all you do, and find that to be meditative, and find it to be contemplative, and find it to be an exploration in, I couldn't do this, and now I can. and I'm better at it now than I was yesterday. I'll be better tomorrow. And that becomes a metaphor too. Again, when I go into events, whether it's associations, companies, and do a keynote speech, I'm not offering a juggling coin collecting show. I'm offering a presentation about keeping our focus and a presentation ultimately about getting better and more efficient in fun and exciting ways with the things we do each day. And with that in mind, juggling and coin collecting might be a really great metaphor for people to learn. But it doesn't mean that I'm coming in with a juggling show. And it doesn't mean that if you're practicing juggling, you're learning to be a juggler. What you're doing is learning process, and you're learning consistency. You're learning to stay on a trajectory, and that is going to increase your successes.
I love that. Yeah, learning consistency. That's the one that I didn't apply at that time.
It's
And
important.
if I had wanted to, I could have stayed over in the corner and just figured it out.
Absolutely.
So this is probably time to talk about your new book,
I'm excited.
Reclaiming the Now, which
Reclaim
I
the
love.
moment, the moment.
Reclaiming the Moment, right. Where you've got 7 strategies for reclaiming the moment. What are they and how do they
Sure,
work?
absolutely. So the book is called Reclaim the Moment, 7 Strategies to Build a Better Now. And it's out August 20th, 2024 on Wiley. And I say that.
Which means it's out now by the time this is,
Exactly.
by the time you hear this, dear listeners. Yes.
Exactly. So we're talking today before it comes out, and listeners will be hearing this after it comes out. And it's going to be available wherever books are sold. But the idea behind it was, okay, when we feel thrown off track by the world, what are some things we can do, some perspective shifts we can make to get back on track and feel that we are centered, grounded, and focused and ready to work and explore once again? So I explored some things that I think about, some things that I do. For example, when the world has me feeling pessimistic, and that's true for many, if not all of us, that we feel that way from time to time. When the world has me feeling pessimistic, this isn't going to work, I don't know, the world is too intense. What do? I focus on the possibility of kindness, that I can be more kind with myself and the people around me. It sounds so simple, but it is essential because human beings are social creatures. We need one another. We cannot be aggressive and combative constantly. We need to focus on kindness. I think it's an essential quality in human beings. So when we focus on kindness, all of a sudden we start to see possibility in one another and we feel more possible in ourselves. And as a result, less pessimistic. So believe in the possibility of kindness. I mentioned one of the strategies before, keep your eyes on the knife. It's a juggling metaphor. And again, what's the most mission critical task in front of you? What's the thing that matters most, that if it falters or fails, has the greatest impact? Keeping your eyes on the knife, that thing is going to give you a sense of purpose. And with that sense of purpose, there's going to be an uplifting psychological affect, and that's going to push you through in a world that is increasingly complex. So cultivating a revolutionary mindset is the third. It doesn't mean that you run through the streets in riot format. It means that you think about things in new ways. It means you think about the potential for situations in new ways, that you see beyond what's immediately in front of you, and you use your mind in an expansive way. So leaping into the dark is the next one that goes along with the last. It's about creativity. It's about exploring creative approaches to situations and stepping into the unknown, because when we do not step into the unknown and instead stay outside of a situation looking in, we're never going to get to where we want to be. So engaging with laughter is the next one. I think it's really important to be laughing with those around us and laughing at and with ourselves so that we can stay grounded in this reality rather than just be lost, which is easy to do in a world that is complex in that way. And then the last two are developing relationships with other people. We come into being as ourselves more through relationship. And what I mean is, the more we engage with other people, the more we learn about ourselves and the more we grow into ourselves. And the last one is start a reverberation effect. And I had been thinking for a long time about ripple effects and how a ripple effect is a nice idea. Drop a stone in a pond and it ripples out and dissipates. But I thought, what's a lot more interesting is a reverberation effect. Like when we engage with the world, when we share an idea, somebody gives us an idea back and we're open to it. And then somebody else gives us some input and we're open to it. And all of a sudden, teamwork, and relationships, creativity, thinking with a revolutionary mindset, keeping our eyes on the knife, and being kind with one another come into focus as we all reverberate with an idea and develop it and have it just transform and grow. All of these things create more space, more potential for us to be living and engaging with the world more fully.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That puts it all together. Talk to me a little bit more about engaging with laughter. There are people who will say, but there's nothing to laugh about at my office, or things like that. Or how can we laugh when there's climate change happening and
Yeah,
not enough water, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we engage with laughter?
yeah, it's essential, meaning that we have to figure out a way. I am not entirely convinced, even though, yes, climate change is real. Hey, listeners, hi. Even though climate change is real, and even though the world is increasingly intense, politically, socially, and on and on and on, we have to find ways to be at least a little lighthearted at times amidst that. We cannot possibly get through our lives entirely seriously all the time. We have to engage, meaning engage with life and engage with other people with laughter, meaning we need to feel that sense of uplift that we get through looking at the world with a deep breath. We cannot possibly just hammer through life relentlessly. We're just not built that way. Humans are not built that way. We are insecure, frightened, terrified creatures, all of us. I don't care if you are deadly serious and a CEO. I don't care who you are, what you are. We are all insecure, frightened, terrified creatures. We need the uplift that comes from laughter and lightheartedness. We need to connect with one another. And if the office is too deadly serious to even laugh, then that itself is ridiculous. And we need to recognize that. We can work there. We can exist there. We can spend a career there. But it's pretty ridiculous that the situation is such that we are not even able to smile at our own experience there. That's something to consider as ridiculous even. And looking at the world from that perspective, that sometimes we're in ridiculous situations. Even that acknowledges that this guy, is in ridiculous situations sometimes. Okay, how can I either explore this as ridiculous, make it less ridiculous, make it more, connect with other people about how serious the office is, that sort of thing. It's all about connection ultimately with ourselves and with other people. So engaging with laughter is a way to do that.
And not being mean.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
of course, one way of laughing is to laugh at someone else.
Sure. And I mean, we're always going to be able to poke fun at one another. If you and I stayed on this call for 6 hours, we'd eventually, make fun of something, right? You'd make fun of something in me. I'd make fun of, but poking gentle fun is different than cutting people down. And we are all harm-causing creatures. We're inherently harm-causing. I mean, by the very merit of our existence and the way we drive around and the things we do, we are causing harm to other people. And in fact, through our focus on one person, I'm sure that we're causing harm to somebody else by not engaging with them. There's always going to be harm, and we're always going to be at the root of that. How can we diminish that? How can we reflect on and move forward into spaces where we're doing less of that? That's the world I want to live in. And sure, we can talk about being cutthroat, businesslike. We can talk about being competitive. That's fine. It's old. I've heard it. And I'm not realistically as interested in that as I am the potential for us to be kind to one another or kinder in the midst of being harm-causing creatures. It's way more interesting. It's actually fascinating. Whereas being competitive it's been done. It's fine.
Yeah.
We can read 1,000 books on being competitive and how to be more competitive and how to one up one another and dominate one another. I'm bored even saying that much about it. Kindness is way more interesting.
I love that. Also think about the difference between being kind and being nice. Because being nice, trying to be like, I grew up, be a nice girl, and be a nice girl, don't make waves, don't complain, or if you're going to make waves, you do it within the appropriate framework. Do you explore that, the difference between nice and kind?
It's really interesting they bring that up because, when I've spoken to young people about this, I do explore the difference between the two. I don't explore it in the book, but I definitely do when I speak to young people, because being nice is to follow an assumed rule set about our conduct.
Mhm.
And it's different than kindness, which is generative. It's kindness comes from within and is shared and explored and develops and grows. Being nice means that I smile and I say, "Oh, it's so nice to talk to you today." And then so those sorts of things. But I think that there's more substance behind kindness. I think kindness runs a bit deeper than just the pleasantries with which we offer one another in the midst of this society. I think that kindness runs deeper. It's more valuable, and it's more fuel for a better world.
And it brings you out of your own preoccupation, which is part of what I like. Is like, make it about others. Use
And
I call it strategic empathy. As you put yourself in the shoes of your listeners, how can you be kind to them in a way that will matter to them?
That's absolutely right. And it's interesting because you come from an arts background and I have an arts background as well. So we know that when we're on stage, that there's a relationship between us and the audience. And if it's opera, if it's performance, if it's speaking, if it's coaching, if it's training, there's a relationship that happens, that grows and is developed. And when we're connecting with other people and really listening to them and paying attention to them, there's a different growth that happens. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but kindness really is fuel for a better world. And it's fuel for a better world because it engages and ignites people in a different way than challenging them and than being combative with them, and it's a better approach that is more nurturing, inspiring, energizing. It does all the things that competition does. And at the same time, it allows people a sense of self in the midst of that. It's really quite awesome. So anyway, it's been an amazing exploration for me over the last, I've been talking about this for quite a while, but especially over the last 4 years since the pandemic started, 5 years essentially, almost coming up, thinking about ways that we can, in the midst of a complex world, be better to one another, and why do that. So it's a great exploration to pursue.
So out of all of these, where would one start? What's the most important strategy to start with?
Yeah, I would say kindness to yourself, kindness to others. And that sounds like a soft skill. People in business oftentimes have been, it goes back and forth between hard skills, soft skills. So that sounds like a soft skill, kindness. It's essential. It's essential. The world that I want to live in is a world where we are kinder to one another. Our tendencies are towards aggression, violence, and intensity. And that's fine. And I say that as fine with air quotes. The point being is that we can always gravitate towards that. We can always gravitate towards intensity and anger and whatever else. I think that kindness is a bigger challenge for insecure, frightened creatures. And I think that that's the direction we need to go. So when we focus on kindness, or rather when we embrace the possibility of it in situations that are challenging, we open ourselves up in new ways to new possibilities. I think a lot starts with that. And I've learned that in my own life. And that's why I suggest it to other people too.
So from kindness, and what you get is you learn more about other people.
Right.
You make the whole atmosphere better.
That's right. Corporations and companies and businesses and associations ask me all the time to talk about teamwork. But what they're really doing is checking off a box. We need to have something about teamwork, communication, leadership. Can you hear the inspiration in my voice when I say that? Communication, teamwork, leadership. That's fantastic. All those ideas are important, but let's not check them off as boxes. Let's actually explore the generative root ideas and motivations that lead to better teamwork, better leadership, better communication. When we start with kindness, when we add focus, when we collaborate and think and develop relationships based on, some of the ideas in my book, certainly, we're going to have better teamwork, engaged teamwork. We're going to have compassionate and clear thinking leadership. We're going to have communication that is open and that is honest, that is real. All of a sudden, teamwork, communication, leadership get way more interesting than just checking off boxes.
So, Greg, how tell us a story about how this helped. I know you've been doing this for a long time, but
Sure.
how did this help a company you were working with?
Oh, that's an
How did
awesome
how
question.
did this solve a problem?
Sure,
This
absolutely.
concept.
Absolutely. So I was working with a company, let's just say an internet company on the East Coast, a big, 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 big internet company. And they were having a problem with people thinking in too regimented a fashion. Okay. So they're having people follow rules, which they wanted. They were having people follow processes, which they wanted. But the net of that was that people were doing exactly those things. Checking boxes down the
Mm.
list, and there was no interaction, there was no connection. People were just checking boxes. So one thing that I did in the span of a multi-day seminar and multi-day interactive training and workshops and whatnot, along with the keynote, was to have people sit down and try to think of impossible situations for themselves that they couldn't possibly get out of and couldn't possibly work their way through. For example, saying to them, what's something that could happen here at this company that is theoretical, hypothetical, that you can't imagine happening? So I had everyone think of that. And then I said, okay, small groups, pick one of those things and figure out a way to make it happen. Let's say you have no budget. Let's say that you have no limitations. Let's figure out a way to make that happen. And we did it for fun. We did it for the sake of laughter. We did it for the sake of exploring with a revolutionary mindset new possibilities. We did it for the sake of leaping into the dark and facing a situation that was seemingly impossible along the way. We did it for the sake of being kind to one another and actually listening to one another and paying attention and then having ideas reverberate. And the net was that people walked away from that exercise going, wow, okay, well, maybe that is possible. That thing we thought was impossible, we just brainstormed on it for 45 minutes, and all of a sudden we came up with all these potential ideas. People were engaged, they were energized, they thought about possibility in new ways. And ultimately, that's what we're getting after here is what possibilities, what space do we create for growth when we reclaim the moment and start to build a better now? And that's exactly what happened there. Those people were inspired and engaged by thinking about impossible things in new ways and then interacting with one another, with the idea being, how can we make those impossible things possible? Lots of potential came from that.
Okay. How do you, I love this. I love this. I could see being totally inspired, spending a Saturday with you and being totally inspired. And then I open up my computer Monday morning
Mhm.
and I've got, 5 fires have to be put out
Yep.
and all this, and I go right back to the same old patterns.
Yep.
How, and I have to tell you that focus has been a lifelong challenge for me. So
I get it.
I
I
probably
get it.
should have stayed with that juggling lesson when I was 19 because I am very easily distracted.
Yes.
How do we keep this going in manageable chunks to make this really part of the practice of living?
Absolutely. So Monday morning comes around, you come back to your desk, you open up the computer, and you lose your mind because there's just too much there. You're
Yeah.
freaking out. You don't know what to do. You start thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I can't deal with all these emails. This is going absolutely nowhere. I have no idea how I'm going to even get through this day, this moment, this hour. How do I respond to this one email without having my calendar open? My calendar program isn't working. I need to call IT. The IT person is out to lunch right now. I can't even believe it. Why are they out to lunch? It's Monday morning at 9 a.m. It's too early for lunch. Okay. And you start spinning.
You've been in my office. You've been in my head on a Monday morning, Greg.
You
Greg,
start spinning. Step
yes.
one, kindness with yourself. You return to that. Reclaim the moment. We build a better now. And that allows us to create the future that we want. And it doesn't have to be the future where we retire in 30 years on the French Riviera. The future that we want could be 20 minutes from now. We're not going to get there unless we reclaim the moment and we build a better now. So with that idea, you start with again, I'm pitching my own ideas, but the idea of being kind with yourself, kind with the situation, keep your eyes on the knife. What's the most mission critical of those 5 emails? There has to be one. There has to be one. Pick one and go, even if you can't decide. And what I mean is sometimes the mission critical email is the one that says, answer this or you lose your job, answer this or
Yeah, yeah.
the world falls apart. But sometimes you can't tell. Just pick one and go with it, and then pick the next one after that. As somebody who's been engaged with creativity, that
Mhm.
given a production that somebody puts in front of you and says, we want you to put on this opera, whatever it might be. Okay. It's La Boheme. They wanted you to do, it's La Boheme. It has to happen. It has to happen in the next 4 months. Go. Well, you don't just put on the opera. That doesn't happen this afternoon. There's a number of things that have to happen along the way, right? In terms of casting, in terms of, who's the score, in terms of, you get it.
Yeah.
So we have to do the same sort of triage when we're overwhelmed Monday morning at 9 a.m. Monday morning at 9 a.m., the triage that we do is to think, what's the most mission critical? Keep your eyes on the knife task. If we can't figure it out, pick one, get it done, go on to the next. Be regimented in our thinking in that way, but also at the same time, realize that you can get it done. You can get these things done as long as you engage with laughter, of course, but also with other people. You're making connections. If you think in terms of the connections, if you think in terms of the potential on the other side of leaping into the darkness being those 5 emails you can't possibly respond to. If you allow yourself to have perspective shifts, you're going to be able to get through those 5 emails. Those 5 emails are not the end of your life or the end of your existence. They're a hurdle. And if you can get over that hurdle and continue down the path by picking one, by remembering to be kind to yourself, by thinking with a revolutionary mindset, by leaping into the dark and just going for it, answering that first email and getting it out of the way, you're going to make it through those emails. There's no question about it. You're going to make it through. And I think that this is a process. I think that the things that I write about in the book are not like, do these things and you're good. Just, it's a process. Like learning to juggle, for example. It's a process. And I think that Monday morning at 9 a.m., you have to step first into that process and be on the trajectory we talked about earlier, the trajectory of, I'm going to make it through these 5 emails. That's the knife right now. I'm keeping my eyes on it. I'm getting through these 5 emails. And once you do, I promise you there's going to be another hurdle. It doesn't mean the end of your existence. It just means resetting, reclaiming the moment, and going again.
Which of these is hardest for you?
That's a great question. It depends on the day.
Okay.
Because sometimes
I get it.
Yeah, there's sometimes that, like your perfect example before, engaging with laughter is hard when you feel completely overwhelmed. But it always feels so good once you do, meaning that once you take a step back and breathe a little bit and laugh about how overwhelmed you are, that's a great feeling. I would say oftentimes for me, keeping my eyes on the knife is the most challenging. And what I mean is I want to be talking to you. I want to be planning the next conversation that I have. I want to be thinking about what I'm going to be doing in 20 minutes. And it's like, no, right now, this is mission critical. This is where I'm at, right? So I think that for anyone who deals with distraction, that keeping your focus is something that is a challenge. I know it's a challenge. You've mentioned it as well. That's the one that I'm continually working on, is keeping my eyes on the knife, meaning, what is the knife? What is the most important thing that's flying in front of me right now? And how can I keep my mind and eyes and brain and intentionality on that thing so that I can accomplish it and engage with it in the most effective way possible? That's the hardest one, I would say.
It makes me think of a time sitting in a rehearsal hall in Seattle. Actually, you're in Seattle. One of the things, I used to train a lot of assistants. Got more experience. And the thing that they either had it or they didn't was the ability to anticipate. So there's something there. There's a balance, juggling of keeping your eye on the now and then knowing what's coming. I remember sitting in a rehearsal hall and thinking she's going to need the bouquet in a minute, glancing over, the bouquet wasn't there. I was an assistant. I was like an assistant stage manager, fourth assistant from the left kind of person, and jumped up, ran over to the prop table, put the bouquet where the singer could get to, because she didn't have time. She had to be able to know it was there and pick it up and still keep singing. Yes. And so the prop person had forgotten to set it out and just put it there, and everything went along smoothly. So there is a piece of the now where you also have to sort of keep track of where you are in the greater whole, the arc of the project, the greater whole of it. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
I mean, absolutely, right? Because this, put it this way. Does doing this podcast mean that you and I, again, retire on the French Riviera? No, it probably does not. But what it is part of something greater, which is sharing ideas, making connections, thinking about things maybe in new ways, connecting with other people. Hopefully people will watch, listen to this, get in touch with you, get in touch with me. Does it create new possibilities that lead to our wallets being packed full of $1,000 bills? Maybe. What it probably does, though, is it puts better content, and I don't mean that in a social media sense, but better content into the world. It fills the world with more. I like that
With
idea.
value.
With
I like
value.
delivering value. Yes.
Absolutely. With more value, with more things that matter. So with that in mind, I think that this is a proverbial drop in the bucket of the universe. I don't think that historians are already writing about our conversation right now, but I think that we're contributing to something more, something better, something more valuable. And that's the way that we have to think about that, I think, is our contribution, is it valuable to us? Is it meaningful to us? And if so, do that thing, pursue that thing, make that contribution, because it's all part and parcel of something much greater. I mean, the one thing that we have to do each day, each hour isn't necessarily the thing we're going to hang our hat on, but the sum total, the cumulative effect of all those things actually might be. So I think that's my thoughts.
That's a really great way to end. And because I know you're a pro, do you have a line that you end your speeches with to get us inspired?
Yeah, I say, thanks for coming. See you later. Bye. No, I mean, the line that I often use is, if you want to build a better future, we have to build a better now. Some version of that. The idea being, let's make this happen now. Let's keep our eyes on the knife. Let's focus now. Let's think about kindness and having a revolutionary mindset now. Let's make this relationship and this connection better now, because it means that a few moments from now, a year from now, things will be better, because the trajectory we want to be on starts now. So with that in mind, I say, if you want to build a better future, build a better now. And people seem to be inspired and are inspired by those ideas.
Greg Bennick, this has been such a pleasure. So much fun. Well, just one of the conversations that was deeper than I had expected. So
I'm
thank
so
you
glad.
so much.
I like that.
Well, yeah, me too.
Anytime we combine deeper and fun, that's a great idea. It's a great
Absolutely. Approach. And you weren't even juggling while we talked. So I don't, we'll have to do this in person someday.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having been our guest.
Thank you.
Listeners, viewers, readers, this has been Speakers Who Get Results. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts, because that's the one people track, and tell your friends. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.